Hi, everybody. Hi, Elle. How are you?
I'm good. I got a haircut.
You look fabulous. And you're wearing leopard print, I see.
I'm wearing leopard for you.
Thank
And
you.
I put on
Always
bright lipstick.
appreciated.
Well, you are the queen of leopard.
Uh-huh. And the bright lipstick. Ooh,
Ooh,
nice.
yeah, why
Nice.
not?
Um, so
Okay,
we're talking about
we're talking
sexual
about
fantasies.
sexual fantasies, and we got a lot of great questions. And in
Yeah,
fact,
yeah.
the first one I want to give you is kind of a long one. I'm going to read it, but it's a really good question. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm a cis woman. I've been with my husband, a cis man, for 16 years since we were
Right.
both 19. We're 35 now.
Mm.
Married for 6 years. I discovered I'm bisexual almost 2 years ago while we were exploring the lifestyle. She almost exclusively fantasizes about women, and the type of porn she watches is lesbian porn, reads lesbian romance novels and short story erotica. And she is, her husband seems a little uneasy with it, sometimes makes jokes asking if there's a man in the threesome, blah, blah, blah. Our sex life is great. I'm very attracted to him and men in general still. But she's explained to him that she thinks that she might be hyper-focused on lesbian content because she's passionate about exploring her identity, her new identity, this new part of herself. And she started to feel a sense of shame, like she needs to scale back and watch more hetero content to balance herself out and maybe help reassure him. And she's not sure what to do. It's a good question.
Yeah. So, I mean, it sounds like the question is what to do about him, what to do about her.
Yeah. Yeah, like
Yeah, I mean,
she's feeling guilty for indulging this part of herself, and I think she's feeling guilty because she's feeling like he's not sure what this means, you know?
yeah, yeah. And I mean, so she's in a relationship with him and then they're in the lifestyle, or they were,
They were,
which
yeah.
for people who are listening who don't know what that means, that's sort of code for the swing scene. So I'm going to work on the assumption that they are in some sort of an open relationship. I think that would be fair given that they go to swing parties. You
Yeah.
think?
Or have in the past, so would
Or
be
have in the
open to that.
past, yeah. So she's not saying that she wants to have sex with other women right now, right?
No, she just wants to indulge this, explore this new part of herself.
Yeah. So the fantasy part, I mean, I see no problem with it at all. And, as we've discussed in previous, Friday afternoon discussions that we've had, what folks like to consume in terms of their porn consumption and what folks like to fantasize about is it's certainly an indication of what turns you on. Like, for sure, that's a thing. But it doesn't necessarily indicate that you want to act on something or that it alters your identity necessarily. And so where she's talking about this, and she's not saying necessarily, I think I'm a lesbian, which is a very specific thing and has a lot of other kind of cultural and social implications that come with it. She's just saying that she fantasizes about women. She watches lesbian-oriented porn and lesbian erotica.
And
So
she identifies as bisexual, so
and she identifies
yeah.
as bisexual, right? So, I mean, it sounds like really more than anything, the issue is not so much her fantasies; it's about reassuring her penis having man identifying husband that he's still welcome. Which, I mean, that it's understandable that he would be concerned about it and that he would think, maybe she doesn't want me anymore. But there's nothing in this where she's saying she doesn't want him anymore. She's just saying this is sort of where her compass is sort of heading erotically in that direction. But being married to somebody is so much more than just an erotic compass. There's so much more to it. So, and if their sex life is still satisfying, does she say anything about that? I
She
don't
said they have a
remember.
great sex life.
Right. So it really sounds like everything is okay. And more than anything, it's just going to be an opportunity to, to reassure him, probably on the regular, that he's wanted, that he's desirable, and that if they're both open to the fact that that's part of her erotic template, that she can have that and not have it take away anything from him, would be my understanding. I mean, what do you think about that?
I think I don't think she should feel a sense of shame. Obviously, it's about her bisexuality and being attracted to women and erotically turned on by women. And I think that definitely having a conversation with him about this doesn't take away from you at all. I'm still incredibly attracted to you. I love our sex life, but this is a whole new dimension to me. And in fact, it only benefits you because now I'm thinking about a lot of things as opposed to just one thing. And just letting him know too that it's a healthy part of a human being to want to look into that. And it's a healthy part of him, a human part of him that is going to feel a little weird about it. So yeah, definitely reassuring him on the regular, as you say.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think too, because the cultural beliefs that a lot of us have is that, when you find your partner, your person, that's the only person you have eyes for.
Right.
And the truth is, for probably most people, the person who is your person, who is your partner, is not necessarily going to be the only person you have eyes for. And that does not mean that you're falling out of love with them. It doesn't mean that they're not the right person for you. It doesn't mean that you've made a mistake or anything like that. It just means that human sexuality is very, very nuanced and very textured, and it changes through our lives. And it is possible to be erotically attracted to more than one person at a time. That is part of the human condition. And it doesn't necessarily mean you love your partner any less. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to, or that you need to start calling a divorce lawyer. It's got nothing to do with any of those things. Our culture over the last couple of 100 years has conflated sex and love to the point that we can't see the distinction anymore. And it's things like this that really drive it home, as it were, that there is a real difference between love and sex, and they're complementary. I often talk about them being like chocolate and red wine. They are delicious together, but you can enjoy them equally by themselves.
Yeah, that's good. I love that question.
Thanks to whoever sent that one in.
Yeah, that was great. So we got a few of this question, which is, I fantasize about my ex or maybe someone else while my current partner is fucking me. Is that toxic? Is it okay to still lust over others when you're in love with someone else?
Yeah, and that again, I mean, that's so common, and I saw we got so many responses about that. Like, I still long for somebody from the past, or somebody, somebody perhaps from the future.
Right.
And it comes back to this idea that who we love and what we lust for, what we long for, what we desire, are sometimes they are on the same page, and then other times they are not on the same page for that day, that month, that year even. And it really comes down to, within yourself, the degree to which you can sit with that, the gap between these two things. So sometimes if you're sort of thinking, I need to think about this person, or I need to think about that in order to get off, it doesn't mean that your partner is not desirable or they're not doing anything that's the right thing. I mean, it could mean that, and then we have that's a separate issue. But because we're looking at this only through the fantasy lens today, having fantasies about people other than your partner, first of all, it's not a red flag. It's not anything to worry about on its own. If you are noticing some other stuff that is going along with that you're no longer attracted to your partner, that you're looking for a reason to leave the relationship, that's different. But if you still feel like you're in the relationship, you're into your partner, the sex that you're having is good, pretty good, or excellent,
Mm-hmm.
then, that's a lot of boxes to tick about why this is a
Yeah.
relationship worth saving and worth investing in. And having the occasional or frequent indulgent sort of erotic mental fantasy
Mm-hmm.
about another person or another situation tends to speak more to where your mind goes and what it's almost sort of like the chorus of monkeys in your head who just distract you with stuff. It
Right.
doesn't necessarily have a deeper meaning unless it has a deeper meaning for you.
Right.
And so there is no consensus. The data and the research don't show any consensus that if you think about your ex, it means that you need to go back to them. There is
Mm-hmm.
no definite, cause and effect there.
Right.
If it's an obsessive thinking thing about your ex that you can't
Mm-hmm.
stop thinking about them and you're obsessed with them, that's different
Yeah.
from a sexual fantasy. And I guess I really want folks to start allowing themselves permission to make those distinctions between what's an erotic fantasy, what's an obsessive thing that I'm still hung up on my ex and I need to get back with them. And then, what is it about? And the other thing too, about sex fantasies is that they're fantasies. They exist only in our mind. And so we have total control of everything. We are completely at once,
Yes.
submissive and in control, desired and desiring, it's all
Yes.
of those things. And I think that's what makes fantasies so
Right.
appealing, because it just works out exactly in your favor every single time, unlike real life sex,
Well, yeah.
which often does not.
Right. And that brings us to our next question, which is, do we try to make our fantasies a reality, or are they better left in our minds without coming to fruition?
Yeah. That really depends
Yeah.
on the people involved. It depends on what the fantasy is. It depends on, consent and so many other things. And so it's really helpful, I think, for folks who want to start exploring fantasies, depending on what they are, to have a contingency plan, especially if it's something a little bit edgy, you know. And edgy might be rough sex, edgy might be bringing in another third, fourth, fifth, sixth person,
Or just
edgy
wearing
might be,
handcuffs.
or even, yeah,
You know?
it could be anything.
Right.
If it feels edgy by your definition of edgy, so there's no collective agreement of what edgy is, edgy for you.
Mm-hmm.
Have a little contingency plan, have a discussion with your partner before the event, like days before, not just 2 minutes before.
Yeah.
Days before the event, so you've got time to both really get into it and think about it, about what will we do if this works out really well? What will it mean for us, potentially? And what will we do if this perhaps brings up something a bit uncomfortable and unexpected? What kind of agreements can we make prior, in our sort of sane mind? And what I mean by that is, when you start getting horny and when you start getting turned on, your sex brain can sometimes take over a bit, and you're inclined to make decisions and agree to things that perhaps when you're, more sane, for want of a better phrase, you wouldn't necessarily say yes to. There's actually been research done that the more horny and turned on you are, the more likely you're going to yield and say yes to something that you later go, oh, what did I do that for?
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to have these discussions, in the cold, hard light of day,
Yes.
and make agreements around what happens if it goes well, and agreements around what happens if it doesn't go well. How will we manage it? So, will we talk about this just with ourselves? Do we have a friend who's really into this, maybe, that we can draw on to talk us through it later on? Do we have a counselor or a therapist we can talk to? Do we have an online community that we can go and write about it with? Just to sort of have a little contingency plan in the event we need to change, alter something. And, to practice sort of being with the notion that sex can sometimes bring up things unlike itself. So
Yes.
it can bring up things that are not always pleasant. It can bring up things that are a bit confronting about stuff that we didn't even know was there,
Right.
you know.
Right.
Like sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. So if it feels like it's going to be an edgy thing, just have a little contingency plan in place. And that also the benefit of that too is that it helps both partners or all partners
Yeah.
feel safe going into the interaction, that everyone's been able to say what's on their mind. And it doesn't need to be a big, heavy processing
No.
thing. But I think one of the things that folks tend to make errors in is thinking that, you know, sex is natural, and that because it's natural, when it's right, everything just works out.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you
lots
know,
of things are
time,
natural, and
right, you
you know
know,
what I
time
mean?
and time again, we know that really for sex just doesn't work. And so, you know, this new kind of consent forward, sex positive view is, let's talk about sex like it matters,
Right.
you
And
know. So
oftentimes too, if it's a big fantasy or a big idea that you're bringing up with your partner, taking little steps to get to that fantasy, I think, is a really good idea. So if
yeah.
you have this fantasy of going to a dungeon and being whipped and
Mm.
restrained, you know, that's a lot to take in
Yeah, really.
immediately. So
Yeah.
maybe they start with a little handcuffs. Maybe they start with a little spanking, and then sort of Lama's birth, as it as it is,
Oh.
into the, you know, and see if maybe that's enough. Even
Yeah.
sometimes people go that far, and then they go, you know what, I'm good. I don't have
Yeah.
that fantasy anymore. Or
Yeah.
I really do. I really do. You know, you
Yeah.
learn more about your likes and your dislikes.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Mm.
anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, now here's one. Is it normal for you to never fantasize?
Mm. Yes, it is. But I also think that sometimes we think that fantasies are these elaborate romance novel style, you know, epic
Yeah.
dramas. A
Or, you know,
fantasy
just
is,
that, you know?
yeah, you're right. I mean, a fantasy is, you know, dreaming about finishing work so you can go out and have a cocktail. I mean, that's a fantasy, right? Like, you know, finding your dream apartment is a
Yeah.
fantasy. So, I mean, I think sometimes we tend to overemphasize the heavy erotic element of fantasies, when fantasies really can just be another word for imagination.
Mm.
So when folks say, I don't have fantasies, I mean, maybe you don't have really explicit erotic fantasies, sure, but I'm going to run on the assumption that you still daydream, you still have imagination, you still think about, oh, you know, I can't wait to have, you know, my favorite pasta for dinner. Like that's things
Yeah.
that, you know, just forward projecting
Yeah.
ideas of how life might be nicer and more, you know, comfortable. That's
Yeah.
still a fantasy. So an erotic fantasy doesn't have to be a really elaborate thing. It can be something as simple as, you know, I like the smell of my partner's t-shirt,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. And in fact, you know, a little self-disclosure, I don't tend to fantasize about anything while I'm having sex. And
Hmm,
I think as I was coming up in this world of sex, I felt like I was other, because it seemed like everyone was talking about, you know, when I'm having sex with my partner, I'm thinking about her on a horse and with flowing red locks, or I'm thinking about him fucking me on, you know, the last car of a train. I don't know, but that's also normal too, and that could
yeah,
just be the way your brain is and the way you are at that moment, or you'll grow into something.
yeah,
It's all natural,
yeah.
natural.
Yes, it is. It's all natural. Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's all normal. So the
Yeah.
scale of fantasy from, you know, fantasizing about clean sheets through to fantasizing about something that's, you know, kind of edgy and wild. It
Mm-hmm.
all exists on a spectrum. And for different people, your scale of normal is
Mm-hmm.
really unique to you.
Yeah.
So what's your version of edgy and your virgin version even of normal. That's another fantasy, isn't it? For some,
Yes.
is really, it's really unique to individuals. So we cannot collectively say this is good and this is bad when it
Yeah.
comes to fantasies.
Okay.
Mm.
Should I tell my partner about my fantasies? I think that's what you were talking about earlier, is
Yeah.
sitting your partner down and in another room way before you having sex, and divulge that, and open up that sort of well of communication, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I think for me personally, I'm a little bit on the fence about disclosing
Mm-hmm.
fantasies because it can go really well.
Mm-hmm.
And then for others, it can go really poorly. So, I think back in the old days with sex therapy, they used to say, you should always share your fantasies with your partner and let them into your world. But if you know that something that you're into and your partner is just not into it, what happens then?
Yeah, that's a
It's
good point. Yeah.
yeah, that I mean, again, the nature of fantasies is that it's for your benefit. You get to
Right.
control it. It happens in your head. So you can indulge in it as much as you like.
Mm-hmm.
And if by sharing it with your partner and your partner is horrified or disgusted, what effect might that have on your relationship to your fantasy, first of all?
Mm-hmm.
What effect would that potentially have on your relationship with your partner, second of all?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always curious about what is the incentive to share with a partner? Is it to create intimacy?
Mm-hmm.
Is it because you want to act it out?
Mm-hmm.
Is it because you want your partner to know something about you? There's lots and lots of different reasons that we might be inclined to share fantasies with our partners. And it's helpful to think about, well, what's my motivation for doing this first? Because if I want them to affirm and approve what I say and they don't, then what am I going to do?
Right.
On the flip side, withholding this information and being kind of secretive about it might get your partner offside anyhow, because they'll think, well, what is it that you're fantasizing about that you don't want to share with me? Don't you trust me? So we go back into this thing of having the contingency plan. What are our agreements going to be around what happens if you hear something that you don't like?
Yeah.
What are we going to do then? And this is where it becomes a much more comprehensive skill set, around emotional intelligence, erotic intelligence, being able to talk about stuff that brings up feelings that make us feel uncomfortable. And sometimes that's how it is. Now, if you have a partner who shares your erotic vision, and you already know that kind of stuff about each other, then of course, by
Mm-hmm.
all means, share the fantasies. It's a fabulous thing to do. But if you know you're on this page and you suspect your partner is on a different page or definitely not on your page,
Mm-hmm.
then it might not necessarily be a practice that's going to be good for you and your relationship. And if the incentive is to create intimacy, there's a lot of different ways you can create intimacy. Sharing fantasies is only one way, so it doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to have a connection. It just
Right.
means that style might not be your style.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I think also what I got to when asking people to send in questions is really people just want to know that it's okay to fantasize, that they're normal,
Yeah,
that they're, because there are some people that might be disturbed about what they fantasize about. And this is the
right.
whole, we could go into this in a bigger way when we talk about, porn and the people thinking that porn sort of makes you think in a certain way. And
Yeah,
so I think it's important to tell everybody that it's in your head and you have control over it, and it's there to titillate you. And
mm-hmm.
as long as nobody's getting hurt and there's consent,
Mm-hmm.
then am I wrong? Then I would say it's fine, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And that's the thing. I think, and certainly for a lot of folks of multiple genders, who perhaps have fantasies about sort of, quite rough things or things that they think, gosh, that makes me feel a bit icky in real life, but in my fantasy world, I find that really hot.
Hmm.
That's really normal
Yeah.
to have a gap between what you fantasize about and what you actually want to do in real life. Those things don't have to be the same.
Hmm.
And that's perfectly fine. For some people, our fantasies are a way to help us process some sort of unresolved feelings or unmet, you know, um, emotional needs
Hmm.
that may or may not have anything to do with sex even. That's the thing about fantasies, is sometimes they don't actually represent what they seem to be at face value. So, explorations of gender perhaps, or explorations of power, or explorations of consensual non-consent, and these kinds of things often speak to other aspects of our lives that don't necessarily have an outlet. So that's one of the benefits, I think, of fantasies, is that you really get to explore your edges in ways that you would never necessarily do
Hmm.
in real life. And it's a really safe way to explore those emotions and longings
Hmm.
that can be really enjoyable and really healing for people.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. Let's see what else. I think that was sort of it, because I kind of melded it to this next
Yeah.
one is about dreams, but that's different than fantasies.
Yeah, I mean, I think with dreams we have less control over. Like,
Yeah.
dreams sort of just happen by themselves. But I mean, sex dreams sort of, it comes into it a little bit too. But um, having dreams about things, again, doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a literal interpretation. Sometimes it can be speaking to a dynamic. It can be speaking to an energy that, depending on who you're with and what you're doing. And I mean, sometimes people have sex dreams about people that they despise.
Yeah.
And then, and then when they wake up and they're like, ew, I would never with that person.
Yeah.
So
This,
it
yeah.
often, the people who appear in our dreams aren't actually who we think they are. They're aspects of either other parts of ourselves or unresolved. Again, a lot of unresolved feelings, and the relationship between sex and emotion is so visceral and so rich that, I mean, that's certainly at my end of the spectrum as a sex therapist. That's the realm that I play in, and sometimes not everybody wants to go that deep, but that's sometimes where that can end up. Which I think is really interesting. But
It is interesting. And if
yeah.
anyone wants to work on dreams, and specifically, there's a gal named Anne Hodder Ship who does
Yes.
dream interpretation and dream work. And so she's on Instagram, the Anne Hodder, HODDER. And that's kind of it.
Okay.
That's
Do we have any comments here in the
porn helped me get better at sex. Okay.
Yeah, cool.
Let's see here. Don't understand that one. Someone said my fantasy does not match what I desire in my actual sex life. So it's so true.
Yeah, that's very common.
Other people
Very,
sort of,
very
yeah.
common, yeah.
Let's see. I think that might be it. Someone from Australia. Good day from Mornington Peninsula, wherever that is.
Oh, that's where I grew up, Mornington Peninsula. G'day. I don't know who you are. I can't see, but hello.
Awesome.
I grew up on the Mornington Peninsula. That's my turf. Yeah.
It sounds very lovely.
It's very wet.
I could, there's a
ocean on both sides.
Yeah, sure. My brain is a 14-year-old boy. Really,
That's
just
perfect.
shake it and it'll come out with something that is infantile.
Excellent.
All right, so you can find Cindy at Cindy_Darnell.
Yep.
On Instagram, cindydarnell.com. That's Cindy with a Y and an I at the end. And you can find me here, the L Chase, on all the social medias and lchase.com. Next week, I don't know what we'll be doing, but we'll be doing something fun.
We'll be doing something fun. Let us know. Send us little doodads. Tell us if there are any themes that you want us to cover, because you know, we just make it up as we go along. That's like right. You do.
We're just sitting here. I'm looking for a reason to put makeup on. I actually feel like myself right now. All right. Thanks, Cindy.
Nice to see you. Go back to your afternoon. I've got to dash out and do some things that are slightly fantastical and slightly practical. So that's my afternoon. But at least we've got springtime here in New York now. It's sunny and fabulous.
Yes. Oh, that is nice.
That is nice.
All right.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for coming in. All right.
Bye.
Bye.